We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast on the We Made This podcast network. My name is Kurt North, and I am your host for today. And alongside me, as always, is Mark Adams. Mark, it's been an age since I spoke to you. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Not too bad, as good as can be expected in the current plague times. But yeah, I'm all right. Bored. But aren't we all?
Well, yeah, I think we might touch upon being bored in current times in some point in this episode, actually. But we'll see how we get on. And alongside us here today is Carl Bryan. How are you doing, Carl, mate?
I am pretty good. How about yourself?
Getting there. 2 episodes ago, I said I was hungover. I'm still hungover from that, and it is probably about 3 weeks, and I'll still be hungover. So, but you know, I'm doing all right. I've got my pint of juice. I'm good. But yeah, we've got Red Dwarf to talk about, which is nice. A bit of background. Carl, you've been on about 15 podcasts today, recordings, haven't you?
I am. I'm on a bit of a streak for recording for Cerebral Jukebox. This morning, I completed my 6th one. Myself and Mark did a recording this morning. By the end of the week, I'll have done 10 recordings in a week, and I'll be doing the editing next week.
Wow.
So this is just the flickering ember of my energy, just about ready to go. Just saving it for Red Dwarf, and then I'll just slump over.
Fantastic. Well, we won't keep you any longer. We'll go straight into the episode. This week, we are looking at Timeslides. It was season 3, episode 5. It originally aired on the 12th of December, 1989. So we've only got one more episode to go, and then we're in the 90s. We've been talking about that on previous episodes. This episode sees us being able to time travel via the medium of negatives and photographs and stuff. Something that I might have got somebody for Christmas over the Christmas special. If you remember back on the day when I got Colin the Christmas special. So it's nice to go back there. So, Carl, what do you think to this episode? Is it a favourite of yours? Where would you rate it?
It is. I rate it very, very highly. Normally I do rewatch the episodes before we do the records, just to give myself a quick refresher if there's anything I missed. And it always surprises me how much I can pick up now. Especially with some of the jokes in this one, because I think some of the jokes are a bit more adult in this one, in places. But this one, just the concept of it, of using photographs to travel back in time. If you're thinking about something that came out in 1989, I thought we were into the 90s by this point. It's a pretty big concept. It's very original, and I don't think it's been done much since.
I like it, and I think that the concept is a great concept for 1989, but it's also kind of dated now because you don't get negatives. So at the time it was cutting edge, but in a world with no negatives, because who takes anything other than digital photographs, it's fascinating that it's both innovative but completely out of date.
Until Christopher Nolan does a film about it, and then we're good.
If you were to do it now, it would all be sort of hipsters who still believe in doing things on film. So it would be a lot of very arty photographs that you could travel back into, but it wouldn't have any people in it. And knowing a man who runs a film development studio, he's probably going to kill me for saying that.
That still actually exists as a thing.
Yeah, it's still very popular. A friend of mine runs a photo. It's what's literally called the Photo Parlor, and it's a place for people to go and hand develop films. And he's based out of Nottingham, and he does really, really well. He's closed at the moment, but people are sending him stuff through the post. So there's a lot of enthusiasts still out there using things. I'm probably not all hipsters, so I do apologise in advance. Don't write into We Made This.
I also apologise for assuming that their hobby is dead. Sorry. Not really very sorry.
Well, the thinking about photography and dead, and you're going to love this, Mark. I recently watched an X-File episode.
Oh, fucking X-Files. Talk about you too as well, and we've got the set.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Because we're talking about bands later, aren't we? So that'll probably go up. But That episode was about a photographer who was immortal because he caught death on camera. And there's a long running kind of thing that Scully is immortal because he died and she took the immortalization of it. So there's a running like theory that Dana Scully is immortal, which is great. But one of the things I did geek out about today, actually, I was looking at I was just kind of like watching this episode again, and with some of my interests is just working out how this would work in a science. Say if we were to do a film based on this, how would it work? And I went down the quantum entanglement route of like the picture was taken at the place. You've got the solution would be somehow quantum entangled, so that the fact that it's quantum physics is pretty much faster than light. I'm not a scientist, by the way.
But, me neither.
But the fact that the quantum entanglement could be a way around of actually doing that. The only downside is that when you get into certain parts of it, if it's just a magazine cover or just a video of something that wasn't there at the time, so it would have to be a negative because the negative would have been in that space at the time. So I went down that route the other day. This morning, I was watching the double slit experiment and everything, refreshing my memory on that. So that was a bit of geekiness for me today.
I mean, I just took Holly at the words of the development fluid must have mutated.
That's typically me, though. I was like, how is that going to work then? How does that? If you think about it, how does it work? And I managed to get it to work apart from one scene. But let's start with the top of that. Mark, trust me, you don't want to be in my brain.
This isn't how we analyze Red Dwarf. We've been through this. Red Dwarf is allowed to not make sense.
Well, I know, but this was like genuinely going, this is a great idea. How could I make it fit into a decent sci-fi concept? And I wanted to make it work.
I thought that Holly line was pretty much Grant and Naylor when they go, how does it work? It just does. We've only got 25 minutes. Just go with it.
Well, I'm gonna pitch it to Nolan and see what happens in the next few years and see if I can get some money for us. Let's start from the beginning. Let's look at the golf set. What did he make to this opening scene? And do you think that Kat has now learned how to play golf, Mark?
Well, first things first is I want all of the games that they suggested. They all sounded really fun, and I would happily have a weekend of playing all of those games. And I know they were listed as supposed to being as like something that was supposed to be ridiculous or for people who are going crazy from boredom. But no, I'd totally give all of those games a go. And that golf game in particular was fucking superb. I want it.
What a model. Just what a model. And just from knowing the tradition hearing a lot of behind the scenes stories, it's no surprise to me that Craig Charles is sat next to it with his hands as away from this model so it doesn't just fall to pieces when he touches it.
Yeah, he was renowned for like sort of breaking sets, wasn't he, and stuff. So yeah, that is fantastic. I think the actual original shot as well was meant to be designed that you would think you were on a golf course originally. So the way the camera pans out, you think, oh, we're on a golf course or we're on something, and it would zoom out. But you can totally tell it's like a Tracy Island kind of Blue Peter job, which is fantastic. But I was talking about this a couple of episodes ago. I think it was Polymorph that was talking about the fact that we move away from some elements of storytelling, but I kind of didn't factor this one in when I was watching it until ready for this podcast. But this idea that Lister is really bummed out, and he's totally bummed out. He's just so like fed up with everything, and the fact that they're using things like this is worse than prison, that you've got that he's just so sick, that he's just so unhappy, and that Rimmer almost like sees that as well. I mean, this is a particular story element that, as I say, has been missing a little bit on the last couple of episodes. But what do you make to this different take on it? Because this is beyond just being isolation. This is like he's fed up now, and given our circumstances, we're currently at time of recording in lockdown 2 in the UK. I can imagine that being felt around the country and around the world in a lot of places at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it it was from watching it again today. It made me realize just how harsh it's delivered. And that when he says the line, in prison, this is worse than prison. Now I'm older and hearing that, you go, oh, it is, isn't it? Because, he can't go anywhere. He's completely, and this is like a major BBC sitcom in like the late 80s, when the rest of the time it would be, not ever decreasing circles. What's the other one? The Good Life and stuff like that. But then you've got this guy who's now in space and suffering mass depression because he's realized that he's basically sitting around waiting to die.
Yeah. I took a slightly different take on it. It made me think about, I've been in both Lister and the cat's position in a friendship in the past. And it's really quite a serious but awful situation that if someone's stuck in a rut, but it's not a rut to their friends, it's actually incredibly hurtful if you tell them you're stuck in a rut. It's nobody's fault either side of that particular issue, but the cat is genuinely hurt when Lister basically tells him he's in a rut and takes it personally because he's happy in that situation with Lister. And I've, maybe not recently, but I've definitely been on both sides of that coin, where I've been mortified that I've been having the best time with a partner or a friend, and then they've felt for a long time that they're stuck in a rut. And then, I remember leaving my first job. Everybody there was devastated that I'd left, but I was like, I am fucking rotting in this job. And I probably could have phrased that a little bit nicer, because they weren't, and they were sad that I was leaving. And I guess we've looked at it in slightly different ways. I absolutely see that the lockdown thing is a perfect metaphor for it. But for me, it did hit really hard home, because it's hit really hard home when I've been on both sides of that coin, Yeah,
no, that's good. It's good that you've looked at it from that viewpoint, because obviously it's the point of view in which you take. And, a lot of times people will put on what they perceive on themselves or something that you've done. So I think that's definitely... it's definitely worth mentioning, because it's not something that I thought about. I mean, it's when you think about it, of course it is. Especially with Cat being developed more and more as well, and you don't know what people are thinking. I know, and that goes for now. Mental health for people at the moment can be, people can be completely okay. Other people might be really kind of suffering inside because of where we are. But the fact that someone's like really having, as you say, really enjoying themselves or think everything is great, and then to be smashed that way, it's the higher you are, the harder you fall kind of thing, isn't it? So
with the cat as well, the reason why he's probably so accepting of it all is it's all he's ever known.
Yes,
because he grew up on the ship. So the fact that this is his entire planet. Almost, because have they been off world yet?
Yeah.
No, they haven't. They say with backwards. So that's like new experiences for him, is actually going off the ship. But he's perfectly happy to kind of stay on the ship, and that's let's say it is interesting. Like I say, Cat's so adjusted to it because that's all he's ever known. I think Rimmer will have adjusted to it because he can't really go anywhere, or he's not really supposed to go anywhere with the light bee thing. Even though in the first few series they just ignore it few times.
Yeah. But on Polymorph, we discussed how the Polymorph, and we've got a story for that. Manages to get Rimmer, but yeah, we've gone over that. Still continuing on that thing, because I think Rimmer's an interesting one, because it's an interesting line the way he delivers it. That Lister's like rhyming off the same thing he said to Cat, the fact that he's sick of it, he's sick of you, sick of your smile, sick of your nostril flaring, and the way, and it happens quite a lot in the series going forward, is the way that Rimmer just turns around and goes, "You're unhappy, aren't you?" Like that, as if it's like just it's not going in. And I thought that was really good. To be fair, I thought it was a great little moment.
The conversation that kind of follows with that, where they're talking about what I guess we're about to go into with Vicky Holden and the tension sheet. It's the friendliest of all the episodes I've sort of sat in on here. It's the friendliest you've ever seen them, I think. just chatting away in that, you know, Rimmer knows Lister's depressed. You did do that. You're unhappy, aren't you? But he's still there talking to him like, oh, I'm going to let up on our bantery tension for a moment, and we're just going to sit and talk this out, because he's probably had it as well, but he's just not shared it with Lister, or didn't feel like he could share it with Lister.
Well, yeah, I mean, flip that on the other side later in the episode where, you know, Rimmer's trying to get him back. There's multiple ways you can view that. You can view that Rimmer wants to be the mega rich person with Jones, or you could view it that Rimmer's actually quite scared he's going to be left on his own. He's like, Rimsy, Listy, you know, it's remember me, it's Arnie, it's, you know, Listy, remember me kind of thing. So he's really struggling on that side of things as well.
Yeah, and I think it does emphasize that their relationship has changed. And it does it with the wonderful deadpan humor of, you're unhappy, aren't you? But it does show that he gives a shit, which I think is probably the first time, or certainly a very significant time, where Rimmer's actually kind and thoughtful.
Well, we talked to Maroon, didn't we, when he called him Dave?
Yes.
So it's a slightly moved on version of that. He doesn't call him Dave here, but I think the Dave thing was more personal. It was more of a, you know, oh, I feel for you and kind of thing, where this one's more of a, I feel like I'm losing you, rather than like sort of the, oh, you've done something that's made me proud of you kind of thing. So it's done slightly differently, but they pointing out they said Dave in that one was brilliant. And yeah, of course, as I say, the Listy bit, you know, there is a bit of thing around the fact that he's doing it for his own gain to try and make the money and trying to be human again and stuff like that. And there is a disappointment at the end of the episode, which we'll talk about later. But there is that underlying current of, you can take it another way, and you can take it that he's losing his friend. So, which I quite like. One of the notes I did have in here, just to mention, and it's more of a personal thing, just as a little anecdote, is when he's talking to the cat and he's saying, it's stupid, 2 grown men on unicycles and belting the beach ball up and down the corridor with French loaves, which is, you know, it's like things that TV shows have done before, like Friends with the flaming fireballs that they're throwing at each other and whatever. But it reminded me of a moment, actually, when I was on a gig with my band. And we went to this really, like, posh place to do this wedding. And it was one of those ones where you get the pint glasses, but the stem of the pint glass is like 2 millimeters wide. So it goes up. So, you know, it's really tall.
Yeah.
And it was about £10 a pint. And we kept knocking them over, and we were like, oh, we need to get drinking. So we got really, really drunk. And it was not a fancy dress party, but you know when they have like photo booths and stuff like that where you can put things on.
Yeah.
So we had one of them, and magically we had some goggles, some swimming goggles. We had various different beach balls and whatever. And there was a beach ball and a crocodile. Right, and it was one of those moments where we're sitting around the table with our song words and music sheets and whatever, and the lead singer had his out, and my friend, and you know when when you know your friend so well that a light bulb switches on, you're like, he's going to do something here, you know what I mean? He grabbed hold of the crocodile. Now I was quick enough to grab my pint and take it away, and he just swung the crocodile across the beach ball. The beach ball knocked all the pint glasses over. But what was even better was he was so happy with himself that he'd hit this beach ball that he turned round in a jovial way, didn't see that one of the bridesmaids was right behind him, picked the bridesmaid up because of the way he was moving with his momentum, lifted her up and like body slammed her on the floor, which was like, oh my God, so what's he done there? Now, luckily, they were fine, but, you know, just like something like clicks in your mind. I'm like, oh, I've got to tell that story. It was so funny.
Did you get paid before this gig?
Before this gig, yeah, luckily. But they was just as drunk as we were. So luckily, it was one of those weddings. But, you know, he just like looked and we just turned around. We knew he was in that mindset. So it was like, you know, it's almost like when you see a kitten in its eyes, it's like, oh, I'm going to get you. It's like that. It was like, oh, he's there. Move my pint glass, knocks the thing over, turns around, up he goes. Down she goes. And it's like, oh God, no. So I just wanted to bring that story. something that's happened over the last few episodes is that we've had the brain in the tape. We've had the and a few other things like that, where using various things. And we mentioned about the triangle, better than life cartridges and stuff like that. But in this one, for some reason, they've decided on the cassette tape, because you've got Crichton using one to listen to music, and then you've also got in the at the very beginning, he actually uses a ghetto blaster of all things. So I just find it interesting that they've actually started to use props like that more often, rather than trying to be futuristic like the triangle cartridges. They're using forms like that.
I can imagine it was probably due to, with the triangular tapes or maybe the small tapes, like, how are we going to make this shoot out of his costume? Because the triangular one, that could just be horrific. I'm surprised they didn't try and use like a floppy disk or a CD or something like that. But
well, I don't think I had a CD player until like 1992, 93. So tapes were still pretty much the thing in 1989, I think. Weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I did it as a quiz question once. That I think the CD became like mostly available in 91. So we're probably still a couple of years off.
I remember getting a CD in 88.
Ah, right. Yeah. So I held on to tapes for so long.
So did I.
Yeah. Because I just, these disc things, they're just a fad, back to cassettes. Yes. And then having to rebuy my entire collection on CD.
Oh, man. But yeah, anyway, so he's dancing around and he sees the fluid. And when he sees that the pictures are all kind of moving and there's something that's happened in there, he pops his eyes out, which is nice to see. That's the first time we've seen that, and it's nice to see that they use that gag, because it's obviously something that they use much later on in a different episode.
They've never been afraid of using really simple, like, comedic visual gags, like just like whether it's the eyes popping out. It's so simple because you don't show him obviously taking them out. It's just the eyes out of shot, rub back in. They've never been afraid, and it's always been so effective, which is I think one of the things that is sort of, I can't think of the word now, but makes the writing as good as it is they'll go, right, we're not going to fart around with like have making eyes that Crichton can take out. We're just going to do the old fashioned, pretend his eyes have gone and then just show them in his hands, and it just works perfectly.
And you don't need to do anything fancy with that, because it's, as you say, just literally just do that cut away and cut back again. And I don't think it has any problems.
I like how subversive it is. I like how they kind of, that would be very, very gruesome if it was a human character, but they can get away with so much more with an android. If someone's eyes come out of the socket, that's game over for a person. And I just like what they do with Crichton and the jokes that they make because he's an android.
I like the fact that cassette with him sort of rocking out to it, I like to think in my mind that that's a cassette Lister gave him.
Yes.
He wouldn't rock out on the Nova 5, but now Lister's showing him how to rock.
Well, actually, during this scene as well, I mean, it was great. I did like the actual pop-out thing. It was good nostalgicness for me. It was like, yeah, I quite like that. The fact it's just there in his jacket pocket. Because no doubt all of us would have had hoodies where you have it in the front. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I still do.
Yeah.
Still wearing it.
Yeah.
Got one now, yeah.
So, I've moved on. I'm not wearing a Doctor Who and an X-File t-shirt. But there you go. One of the things I did like as well as a first was, because he took his eyes out, shook them, and then put them back in again, is you get the Robert Llewellyn, I try saying that 3 times, reaction when he kind of like sort of does a second take, which he becomes renowned for during the course of the show's run.
The more I've noticed in this series, obviously it is his first series, but there's still quite a few things where he's not quite honed it yet. If you like, we'll get into it in the next episode, in next week's one. But whenever he's saying anything with an O in it, he's still not nailed the voice on it yet. But the suit makes him look so. This isn't a knock at him, but the suit makes him look so thin in this, even compared to like the next series.
Well, they were saying actually on one of the quarantine episodes that, especially with the head, because the head's like it is more rubber, so they would have spare heads available, like in a minute's notice because they would just either rip or, there would be water coming out of them and all kinds. And the fact that, you're right, he does look really, really thin and he looks really tall because of it as well. Kind of like the aspect ratio is kind of wrong.
Yeah.
But it isn't, but it's just interesting how it's looking back. It's like looking back at old photographs of yourself, really, though, isn't it? It's like, oh God, was I that thin? Jesus.
I miss those days.
I miss those days of being able to eat absolutely everything.
Me too. I've put on 2 stone in fucking lockdown. I'm not thin anymore.
Is that 2 stone per lockdown? So that's 4 stone in total or 1 stone?
No, 2 stone in 2020. Otherwise, no, I'm not that fat. Fucking hell. Do I look that fat? Is that what you're saying? No. Oh my goodness.
I don't know, you've turned your camera off.
Oh, brilliant. So they also say in some of the Red Dwarf stuff, quarantine stuff, that obviously Frank is played by Chris Barry and he gets a chance to punch Rimmer. I keep doing that. Punch Lister, which was a nice scene. So obviously this is the scene where they're going into the photographs and then be able to come out. The first one was of the wedding. With before we get into the Hitler kind of stuff, with the pictures themselves, it is actually quite effective as the way that they designed it. Did you enjoy that aspect of it?
I did. I mean, as someone that's done film stuff, and because of where I learned how to do film stuff just on the digital turnover. So a lot of the stuff I learned became immediately obsolete. So seeing stuff like, because it's basically just a white screen and then they've crowed in over the top, that really was nostalgic for me. And like, that's just clever use of what you've got. And I mean, even the cut of Lister jumping back out again is really smooth. I mean, it's obvious that the screen's not there, and it's a hole that Craig Charles has jumped through, but it's really well done.
I do always think to that scene where he does actually just come out the bottom. That works really, really effective. It's really effective.
Yeah, and the fact he does the in Smeggin jump credible, that could have so easily just been off or just a bit crap, but it's good. It's they always made the most of what they had, which, considering I can imagine how little money and production budget they actually had, is really impressive.
Yes, 30 years ago, the special effects is likely to be crap. And particularly this year with the podcasts I do, I've been watching a lot of older stuff. And I think it's damn important to point out when they get it right. And this spot with Lister jumping out the picture, you're absolutely right. It's great. And the creativity with fuck all budget is something that should be championed. So, yeah, there are bits in Red Dwarf that are frankly naff, but we've already highlighted on this show how brilliant the models were and how much better they were than the CG versions in the remastered. So I do love it that as a group, we're all kind of on the same wavelength when it comes to making sure we point out the good shit and also point out the bad shit, but mostly working on the positives of the show, except for last episode where we slacked it off because it was shit. It was.
Well, yeah. Well,
what was the last one?
Body swap.
Body swap.
Body swap. I like Body Swap.
Well, you didn't
rewatch it. You won't like it.
Yeah, you rewatch it, and why did you not decide to come on the show and talk about it? Put it that way. It didn't go down well. So, but another scene actually, because talking about what you've just said there, Mark, is for me, I've always, and I think I've said this in the past as well. Even the shit stuff is brilliant. Even like my favorite scene. The Rimmer jumping out of the little action man. Out the Starbug when he gets ejaculated.
When he gets ejaculated?
He gets ejaculated, yeah. I've got vodka in this juice.
You thought you were going to get past that word then, didn't you?
I don't think that's the word you were looking for.
I don't even know.
Ejected.
Oh,
maybe you should do that again.
Yes. Okay. I shall do that again, sir. But I do think that even the shit stuff is really good. I mean, I love, and I've said this before, I love the bit where Rimmer gets, he can't do it.
Ejected, Kurt, ejected.
Where Rimmer gets ejected out of, Starbug, and I love it. And it's so corny, and it's just an Action Man figure jumping up and being taken out of Starbug. I think it's wonderful. But in this scene as well, not only is the Lister coming out the bottom, it's also the snow scene where Cat catches the snowball and throws it back. That works really well as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it was made of. It was probably like soap flakes or something like that for back in the day. But yeah, it's that fun thing about that I found out today. The skiers, the male ones, Mark Steele, the comedian.
Mark Steele,
he does a lot of political stuff. He's got like a sort of bowl cut hairdo. He's a very distinctive voice.
Mark Steele's very funny.
Oh yeah.
It was like one of his first TV things. But yeah, the snow. I mean, I'm still trying to work out. I mean, I'm guessing the one that Danny John Jules catches is a ball that's painted. And I can't work out whether they sped up the footage or what, but his reaction time and the time he throws it back is so quick. And I can't work out if it was sped up or just because, dancers' reflexes or what.
I'm going to put it down to dancers' reflexes personally.
Well, you say that, but they have had, parts where they've sped up Danny John Jules in the past when he did that dance.
Talk about shit.
Yeah. Being shit again. Or maybe not.
No, it's just the fact that, you've got Danny John Jules who's a great dancer and you do that, which we've discussed. But yeah.
We have.
Yeah. But you're right. It's I can imagine I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to take too much to speed it up too much, can it really? You could speed up by a little bit and it still would work.
Yeah.
And it's only like half a second long.
I liked in just going with the kind of the relationship build between Rimmer and Lister, that when Lister takes the snowball right in the nose, Rimmer is laughing, but it's more of the look on his face, it's not like, it's more of a, you deserve that. It was just more of a matey kind of thing. It wasn't a particularly Rimmery laugh, but more of a, my mate's just got hit in the face with a snowball. I think that this series is a very sort of pivotal series, I think, for obviously with the aesthetic changes to it as well, but in their relationship and everybody's relationship. And because in this episode, I actually thought Lister was really quite self-serving. It's not an episode that makes Lister look fantastic.
No, and I think as we've watched this show, my perception of Lister has changed a little. He is quite a selfish person on more than one occasion, and he was always supposed to be the goodie, but I don't feel like he is, and I don't feel like he ever was supposed to. He was the lovable bum, but part of his bummitude
is
that he's really selfish. But bumminess is that he does take opportunities to be very, very selfish and look after number one.
Yeah, and especially in this series, doesn't he?
Yeah, and it's never felt like that was how it was, except on this slightly analytical rewatch. So, like I've said before, I'm just learning new stuff about the intricacies and subtleties of the writing that I never spotted the first time around, or the 10th time around.
Maybe just kind of flipping it on his head, same as we did with the earlier bit. If Lister's kind of almost supposed to be our eyes almost in this world, being as he's from Liverpool and he's just been dropped in the middle of this fantastical thing. If we were in the same position and we saw that opportunity, would we do it? Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You would take, absolutely, you would, wouldn't you? Just before we move on from that snow scene, are you aware of the thing that Craig Charles actually did with regards to the writers on that scene itself?
Oh, I think I have heard this. Is about the continuity of the photographs.
Yeah, because originally they did have a scene which they established that Lister had the photograph swapped, and the skiers were talking to Lister about getting the photos back. and they wouldn't have got the photos back at the time that the picture was taken. So that's so it was actually Craig Charles has said, well, you can't do that because they haven't had the camera hasn't been taken, the film hasn't been swapped yet.
Yeah. It's a good. I mean, it's always good when the cast care enough about what they're doing to make sure that the product's good. I mean, Blackadder used to be a big example of almost overdoing that. If you've ever seen the footage of them sort of rehearsing, I think it's Blackadder Goes Forth, they are analysing it to the absolute letter. And it's the joke where they're saying they've got a message for a Mr. Redgrave, but they're just going over what should be in the message and everything like that. And it's almost painful to watch, but they're so gleefully trying to get it so it's the funniest it could possibly be. And I think that's what they're doing with Red Dwarf, is everybody's working together because they know they've got something special and they want to make it the best they can.
Yeah. But on sometimes Red Dwarf, they kind of go, well, Chris Barry's laughing in a corner. We're going to leave that in because Craig Charles did his best line. They'll sometimes do that at the same time, won't they? It's like, yeah, let's just leave that in. Doesn't matter.
It is my regret that this series, I'm not on the episodes of it's the polymorph, the you'll bonk anything lister section. That is one of my favourite bits, to be fair. So I was a bit sad I didn't get to be on that bit because it's just it's probably technically not the best take they've ever done.
Yeah.
But it's the best. It's the best reaction and the best atmosphere of it all.
Well, you never know. We might do a Christmas special where we do a commentary. You never know.
Already not putting me in for another quiz.
Well, we can have you on another quiz, Carl, but you're on my team. Sod Colin, he was crap.
Yeah, Carl was great.
I'm sure he was for you.
Because I'm shit.
That was the thing, wasn't it? It was Colin and Carl that were doing really well, and you and me were sat there going, "Oh dear."
Yeah. So what we basically did for the podcast was me and Mark went, "Hi, Red Dwarf's all right, isn't it? Yeah, I used to watch it as a kid. We enjoyed it quite a lot." And then we got yourselves on, who are all like encyclopedic knowledge. Yeah, like, yeah, that'll do us. Thank you very much. Hitler makes an appearance, and it is even mentioned at the beginning, starring Hitler
as himself.
As himself, which I thought was a brilliant gag. What I like about this particular scene, with regards to the way that it's done, you've got a few lines. Crichton, as I said at the beginning, is one of my favourite characters. He's not quite there with me yet, but one of the things I did like is when he says, "I'll switch to translation mode." And things to remember: stop milk, pay papers, invade Czechoslovakia. That's the beginning. That's the beginning for me of like, yeah, okay. The way he delivers that line is good. There's reaction earlier on, and that's where it's starting to come to it. But one of the things that I noted on this watch was sometimes Red Dwarf does this quite a lot. So you've got the scenes talking about von Stauffenberg, and it's when you have scenes where the audience is ahead of what's happening in the actual show. So when he's talking about the bomb in the bag, we know it's a bomb. Lister doesn't, and they start doing that a little bit more. Yes. And I like that humor. I like the fact that we're in on the joke before they are, and it's the realization that we get. So you sometimes get that in a lot of humor where you're waiting for a character to respond. You're going, "Come on." And there's a little bit of this drawing in on this particular episode, especially with that scene.
That head turn that they do in a line is perfect. It's so funny. And it must have taken a few goes to absolutely nail the timing on it. But the whole time, especially with Craig Charles doing the backward shuffle and the kick, and it's a brilliant piece of physical comedy. I did notice in this scene, almost slightly perturbed, I don't know if either of you noticed, how into Hitler Rimmer was.
He does have like a precedent as liking military leaders regardless of whether or not they are a monster or not. He's a big fan of Napoleon, remember?
Going back to our well of things that we say now that we've picked up from Red Dwarf, I do use the line, "Oh, he was leader of the runners-up in," and then whatever it was. To describe someone who's lost.
Yeah. So do you think then, with what you've just said there, that you've got all these like characters in history like Napoleon and what have you. World War II, was a significant amount of time. You know, there's a lot. I mean, if it was Star Trek lore, you'd have had World War III. You would have had, you know, different wars. You would have had the, you know, in Star Trek Enterprise, there's a terrorist attack because it was filmed in 2002, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, which is obviously an allegory of the time of terrorism. For me, I think they've got a fascination with World War II, personally, because I think that it comes in quite a lot. But the way that they view it via Rimmer is like, it's like what you say, like when they won the second, well, you know, the war in World War II, like exactly what you just said. It's kind of like it's far enough removed from his character. Same as Wilma Shakespeare, you know, or, you know, it's that kind of thing. It feels like it's a distance thing, you know, it's not obviously as thing, but then they'll come to, you know, Hitler in future episodes as well.
Yeah, I mean, another thing to remember that I did kind of forget about at the time was Rimmer's not from Earth. Rimmer's from Jupiter, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He's from Io. So to him, it's, you know, he doesn't pick a side because he wasn't even on the planet when it happened.
I never thought of that. That's why we have you.
Yeah. I mean, looking at perhaps, for example, if we were looking at Russian history, are you saying that we'd be less invested in it because we didn't experience the Tsars or the Russian Revolution? And you can look at it from a more almost neutral point of view than the kings of England, perhaps.
I don't know that much about Russian history to sort of say yes or no on that one, but I get what you mean in that, you know, it's something that when you look in history books, just like when you're doing history as a kid, you could look at things like if you're doing like Native Americans and things like that, if you read the actual text of it, you mean, well, you know, the settlers who went over to America did some very, very bad things. But I can imagine over in America, though, you know, it's not.
Yeah, so it's an objective viewpoint rather than a subjective one, because you're not a descendant of that time. Because obviously, the World War II was a descendant. We are literally what, one generation, two generations away. So we've got a very subjective viewpoint, don't we?
Yeah, I think what I was getting at is perhaps Henry VIII, as an example, would be more of a historical figure that we would associate with us as, because we're British. Whereas, I don't know, Rasputin, we're a little bit more neutral about him, whereas Russian people might be more passionate about the Mad Monk because he was their Mad Monk, whereas Henry VIII wasn't their fat weirdo who had 6 wives.
For us, Rasputin was Boney M's best song.
Oh, it was.
But no, I get what you mean now a bit more. Yeah, so I think that might be why Rimmer's as separate from it as he is. That's why, because to him, it's something that happened literally millions of miles away. And it's all. I mean, it's very distant history for the Red Dwarf crew. The fact he subscribes to Fascist Dictator Monthly, I think on any planet, is still a bit iffy.
He's not necessarily saying he's fascist, but it seems to be that he's intrigued by it.
He's intrigued by power.
You say that, but I'm a scout leader, and one of my was very, very interested in politics from like 14. His knowledge of politics at 14 was better than my knowledge of politics at 38. And I love this story. He was given £15 by his dad to go and enjoy Chinese New Year with his friends. So he bought a bottle of Coke and a cheap sandwich, and he went to see all the fireworks and did all the Chinese New Year stuff, but didn't spend any other money. And he bought a copy of Mein Kampf with it because he was interested in who he saw as exactly the opposite of his political opinion. He was campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn's campaign at the last general election, but with the research of having read Mein Kampf at 14. And his dad was like, well, I'm proud of him for being that dedicated to his cause that he would look at the opposite side. But my kid did buy Mein Kampf when he should have bought lunch.
That's a bit heavy going, isn't it, for 14?
But he was an incredibly intelligent young man who was fascinated by politics.
Okay, moving on.
Moving on from Hitler.
That's the thing. I knew we were going to discuss Hitler on this show. And I was like, well, do I tell this Hitler story? And this is the thing. Has everybody got their favourite Hitler story? It feels so wrong to have a favourite Hitler story.
He didn't pop up in many other sitcoms, did he, of the time? You know, he wasn't in Terry and June.
No.
No, he wasn't, no. Moving on.
Terry and June and Adolf.
Fuck me. Before we do move on, I just want to say one thing. If you had that projector and you had the opportunity to punch Hitler, there aren't many people that wouldn't punch fucking Hitler. I'm a pacifist. I would totally punch Hitler.
It's when Rimmer says, like, you can't just stick one on the leader of the Third Reich. I was like, yes, you can. You can easily stick one on the leader of the Third Reich.
And just so I'm clear, because I haven't said anything in the last couple of minutes, I am definitely not a crypto-fascist. That's all I'm saying.
No, me neither. If you had the opportunity, would you punch Hitler?
Yes.
Yes. I think it's an equivocal yes. And we will talk about Hitler in future seasons, because he does turn up again. So, which is great.
I don't know about you two. It is moving on slightly, but after seeing this when you were younger, did you ever try a banana and crisp sandwich?
No, but I do know someone that does have them. Yeah, I've seen someone who plays in my band, actually, strangely enough. He actually went home one night and often makes himself, when he gets in, if he's drunk, a banana sandwich.
Has he ever done the deep fried double egg with chili sauce and chutney?
I don't think he's done that. No. But having said that, thinking about the sandwich thing, XL cheese crisps. Has anyone had XL cheese crisps?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, God.
Yeah, because they're only made in my county.
Okay. Do they go well with bananas?
That's what you had on with the banana and crisp ice cream. Banana and crisp ice cream. Anyone had that?
Heston Blumenthal sort of jokes business there.
Yeah. Can we move on? Do we have anything else further to say?
No, we can't. I want to talk about the tension sheet.
Well, I was going to bring the tension sheet up later, but if you want to talk about it now, feel free. It's up to you.
All right. Well, so as far as I'm concerned, it's quite a trope, but done in a really silly way. Obviously, everybody plays with the packaging, the poppy paper, as I call it. What's it supposed to be called?
Bubble wrap.
Bubble wrap, thank you. Yeah, everyone plays with that, and it's very flippant. But what it represents is how it does happen that the bad guy makes it big and folk resent it. It's done in, across the board. Stuff that it made me think of perhaps Barry Kent in Adrian Mole. He was the bully, and he ended up being the very, very successful writer that was really, really upsetting for Adrian Mole. Or in the Trainspotting series, Begbie, he becomes a sculptor and earns fuck tons of money when he gets out of prison. And I love that life isn't fair. The bad guy sometimes wins brutality of what the tension sheet represents. And I would absolutely, if I was in their position and someone who was a bit of a cunt ended up doing well, I would absolutely resent it. And I think I have done with people in my life. Like, for example, the racist kid became a police officer from my school. And that really pisses me off.
Yeah, something like that. Is that a case of that? Obviously, you don't know the details behind it. Was it their upbringing? Did they learn to change the way, or was it just the case of bad kid gone good?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, it is interesting, though. I mean, I will jump to where I was going to bring this in, actually, because one of the things that I was going to talk about is obviously they go into the barracks and stuff, and we see Rimmer, and we do see the younger version of Rimmer, and the very nature of the way that Rimmer reacts with himself, and he seems to be so desperate about it. Just as you say, with talking about that, that kid who then goes on and does something about himself, but the very nature that it's not in Rimmer's psyche to, even as a kid, to actually take on board what Big Rimmer's saying. You know, he's not taking it in. He doesn't understand what he's talking about, and it's frustrating. But we also get a reflection of that in, which ties in quite well with the younger version of Lister, because Lister's not willing to take it in either.
One thing about the going back to seeing young Rimmer, the thing that got me, and it still got me when I watched it again today, was who took that picture of Rimmer in barracks at 8 years old of everyone in bed?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's really creepy.
This might be me being slightly naive. What were the boxing gloves for?
To defend himself because he was being bullied.
Right. I thought it was something else, but yeah, okay. I think when I was younger, I was told that it was to stop him from being able to do things to himself.
Yeah,
it could be that too.
That never crossed my mind. My thought was that it was the bully thing, but that didn't cross my mind.
But we're talking about sort of the bad guy done good. It's a bit strange because was it Vicky Holden didn't seem to be the bad guy. When Rimmer's talking about him, he's talking about how they picked on him. The fact they called him Vicky,
yes,
as well.
Yes, but the whole Rimmer saw him as the bad guy, I guess, is what I was getting at. Maybe you're perhaps right that Vicky Holden was as much of a victim as Rimmer, but Rimmer was a contemporary of his and resents him because of it, maybe, I guess. But yes, I know what you mean. It does slightly weaken my argument. But in Rimmer's head, I think Vicky Holden was the bad kid.
Yeah, I think, you know, if Rimmer's like, I was going to use a football analogy, and I shouldn't use football analogies on this podcast.
I've heard of football.
The lower leagues, and, you know, that you've got the Premier League bullies, but then Vicky Holden's like 2 or 3 leagues down.
Yeah.
You know, so he's the one that's most reachable, because Vicky Holden's probably bullying Rimmer because he's the next one down.
Yeah.
You know, so but because Vicky Holden's almost like he's been bullied himself, but as a defense mechanism, he's then doing it to Rimmer.
Yeah, I say it's what's the phrase I was going to use? It shit rolls downhill.
But I also think with that as well that it goes back to what we were saying about Lister in season 1 and 2, that Vicky Holden might well be in their eyes thick, but he's a very intelligent person because he knows what is a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, you know what I mean? He's got his streets about him because he knows what Rimmer's saying. Oh, I'll go down to the patent office and I'll do it. You know, where Rimmer isn't. Rimmer's got no common sense on that regard whatsoever.
I think this was probably the first time when I was younger that I'd ever heard of what the patent office was.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting sort of hearing some things that get brought up in this, and I was like, oh, like I know obviously, bit we've just spoken about. This is the first time I ever heard that Hitler had one ball.
Yes, I think this is the first time I heard that. Yeah,
but I didn't know what the patent office was, and I don't think I knew what it was properly until years later. I just had a rough idea. If he takes it there, then he's going to be rich, and that was kind of all I needed. Looking back at it now, it's like I didn't realize you could just walk down to your local patent office. So I don't know where mine is. I don't know where yours are. Yeah.
No idea.
No.
Obviously, we've gone round a little bit. We've jumped over the scene in the pub as well. But there's one thing there's a couple of things I particularly want to notice. One, again, is another crying line where he says that we could go back to Dallas in November 1963. And the guys Nolan shout, duck. She's just like, brilliantly delivered. I just think it's just a brilliantly delivered line, right, more than anything else.
Everyone's reaction to it as well, like the fact, even the cat who must have learnt this like many years later, they all look at him like, oh. It's almost like the actors are a bit like, come on, Bobby, that's a bit far. You know, it's sort of.
One I did want to bring up is getting the picture of Earth and the talk about Acapulco. So what are your opinions on the Acapulco joke?
I remember as a kid finding it very funny that the fact that Rimmer didn't seem to be listening much, but where it almost cuts back to him going, "Oh, this beach shot in Acapulco, you wouldn't want to move outside the outside of the photograph." But watching it now, looking at the bigger picture of that photograph, Rimmer has been perving on a beach full of naked teenage, which he does say, temptresses.
Teenage temptresses, yeah.
Maybe he took it when he was a teenager, which is fine, but now going back to it is a bit strange. But, Deep Space does things to a man.
It's a bit 80s ick, isn't it? But the reality is, when I went to university in 1997, the first night at the Students' Union was a schoolboys and schoolgirls night, which actively encouraged people to dress up as school kids to be attractive to other young adults, And I was 18 in 1997. And this is 10 years before that. So 80s ick is icky as fuck. But how can you possibly predict what's going to be icky in future when the culture is so icky?
Yeah. I think because of the way that we bring it up, we tend to bring it up purely because it's of note. Whereas we don't necessarily, whereas I know other people will bring it up and almost part of the council culture kind of thing, and talk about it. That shouldn't be said. That should be off there and stuff like that. And we do have that debate on certain ones. And I think it's right to have that debate. There's certain lines that I'm sure each one of us will have a different line on where we would draw it at. So there'll be certain things that we might let pass on that one through. I think it's always worthwhile for us to ask the question on it, because then we can talk about it. We know what the culture was in that time, but it is worthwhile mentioning it because it's something as well. Not only that we're watching this, 30 years past, and we're looking at it from a critical point, and it's something that we just want to like sort of mention to say that we're not averting from it, or we're not actively going out there and finding it. We're just commenting on it.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I was utterly that memory has utterly repulsed me. That the culture I was living in, I didn't question it at all. I wanted to cop off, so I dressed like a schoolboy, and I was 19, and that's yucky. And on being completely honest, into my early 20s, dressed up as a schoolboy and or chased after schoolboys and schoolgirls and at club nights, and that's so repulsive to me now. But it was the norm then.
In my mind, you as an 18-year-old schoolboy still has the handlebar tash and the bald head.
I don't have a handlebar tash.
Well, it goes into the beard, but
yeah.
Just you now, but smaller.
At 19, I had hair down to my arse and a goatee beard.
We're in Movember at the moment. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
We've talked about Crichton before on this podcast about he becomes the exposition piece. What Holly says here is really interesting because she talks about what about determinism then? What about causality? You can't just mess about with history. That's an interesting Star Trek line. That's the kind of like a very Star Trek thing to do. And at this moment in time, we've got both Crichton and Holly delivering lines like that. I think it works quite well here, and I think it's an interesting comment to have about causality and things like that. So we're not quite in the Crichton mode yet, but it's just something I wanted to touch upon as well because Holly obviously says that, and it's a nice little touch.
It's an interesting split level because obviously it's been said that Crichton kind of took a lot of Holly's lines away, being because they referred to him as exposition on legs at one point. But a good thing I think with this is it shows that Holly and Crichton probably both think the same thing, but Crichton can be swayed easier by Lister and by the others, whereas Holly doesn't care. So Holly will just out and out say, you can't just do this. Because presumably Crichton would... You'd think he was smart enough to realise that he would possibly disappear, if you get what I mean, with what's about to happen to him.
Yeah.
He just kind of goes along with it. But
hey, Shady.
So much denim. Oh,
there was a lot of denim.
Let's talk about the smeg and the heads. What do you make to this? I think it's common knowledge that it was Craig Charles's brother.
It was Emil Charles, who I looked him up. He's done fuck all since.
But it's, what an outfit. If this was going to be your only acting role, you do it in an outfit like that, don't you? Just sort of like stick this wig on, put on... No, they're not wings, it's a collar. Get out there. It's he nails it.
He does. And I love that outfit. And it does come across as kind of futuristic with the whole
crypto-fascist,
wasn't it, that he used the term. So a new term to describe particularly unpleasant right-wing people. But I guess it perhaps predicts the term alt-right, maybe?
Crypto-fascist is not in the same political spectrum, but it's like the silent majority. It's like the people who don't really talk about it but have those views.
I didn't realise it was an actual thing. I thought it was something they'd made up for the show.
No, it's a right wing. It's support for the right wing, but without giving you support publicly. So it's like it was a 70s thing. So a lot of people were in support of the right wing movement, but we didn't want to portray that out. Probably because it's not that far away from Nazism, is it? So it's only 20 years from Nazism. So there's this that's what people were being called, crypto-fascists, because they were in support of the right wing agenda, but actually doing it in secret and not coming out there openly as a right wing person.
Right.
Okay. So I'm wrong. Fair enough. But I love how they get it really right with the outfit, and then it's in a normal pub. The normal pub, would realistically, if we're in a future where they've got to the point where there's people living on Jupiter, would the pubs look like that at that period in time? I'm guessing it's maybe 400-500 years in the future that the Lister went into suspended animation. Would pubs really look like that? And would people be gigging at pubs?
Would be a theme bar.
Yeah, it could be. I would take it just purely because I've been in a band and I've done those type of venues before. The Aigburth Arms, when we see, strangely enough, when they talk about it, about the fact that, Lister's, in the next episode, I think is in Last Day, where they talk about Lister's origin story, that when we see that pub, it's more dystopian and like cell bars and things like that, which is kind of like, I remember a pub around my area where it used to have cell bars in there, and it was like a dingy dive kind of thing. But I would take it personally, and I don't think they meant this, but I've been to pubs and working men's clubs, northeast, northwest, wherever, and they haven't aged a day since the 70s.
No.
They haven't physically aged. So in my head, yes, they could have 1 in 300 years and they still be the same if they still exist.
I mean, I've worked those gigs too. I'm a former wrestling ring announcer, and the working men's clubs, you're like, am I still in the 80s? So yeah, okay.
Yeah, and whenever they update those places, they tend to just make it look like a fresher version of what it did before.
They do, yeah. It's normally red fabric and the long things across but underneath the window, the long seats underneath the window, and then obviously your snooker tables and stuff.
Yeah. Or they've all got wood panel walls.
Yes.
There's a really nice working men's club near me where a wrestling show went on, and it was all like half carpet, half dance floor, wood panel walls with a stage and a little DJ booth thing next to it. And this was last year before, and I was like, had a 20-year nostalgia quake of like, look at all of this.
Do you like the song? Rimmer seems to like the song. What do you think to Rimmer's reaction? Because this goes back to Carl, I think, to what you were saying about how much glee he's getting from this.
It's oddly catchy. It's weird because I think he genuinely likes it. It's quite strange that, and the fact that as they're walking away at the end of it, young Lister goes, "What a nice guy." Just shows that if they weren't trapped in a confined space for however long they were there for before the accident at Red Dwarf, or for the actual sort of events of Red Dwarf, they probably would have got on. Maybe.
That's a good point, that.
Yeah.
I took it as a different thing that he was winding up current Lister. But now you've said it, Carl, you've got to remember, because Rimmer's music taste has been emphasized as being really, really bad, and the song is supposed to be really, really bad, I can see that you might be right, that he genuinely likes it because his music taste is wretched.
I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I think he had every intention when he went in there, saw it was that, and saw it was driving Lister mad because of the listy thing that we talked about the, it's Arnie, it's me, it's Arnie, which is later on in the episode, that he genuinely is wanting to make fun of it because he's getting one up on Lister, but at the same time secretly likes it.
Yeah. It's weird because the scenes, see, because you've got the thing, the reason I thought he genuinely liked it was because he asked for a copy of the record at the end.
I thought that was going to be a case of he was just going to wind Lister up like Cerebral Jukebox kind of style.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I suppose so. Good plug.
Not to mention your podcast again for the second time.
He was completely and utterly ignorant of what a hologram is, despite the fact 10 years later, a hologram was perfectly normal aboard Red Dwarf. I feel like hologram technology would have existed 10 years before the sophisticated hologram technology that we see with Rimmer. So as much as it was a funny gag, it didn't work quite for continuity. Or am I being a shithead again?
No, I mean, he doesn't know what an android is.
No.
Which is, you take one look at Crichton and you would go, robot. And he's Lister's so wrapped, young Lister's so wrapped up in what he's doing that he's just not paying attention, or he's genuinely thick. But the fact he doesn't notice it does make it feel, I mean, with the look of the pub as well, it does make it, you think like, oh, it's gone back to a time before the future almost. But
yeah, like a classic Star Trek, going back to the Star Trek thing, you're going back to that time, like the 80s or the 90s, because it's set in that mode. Because Star Trek did that all the time. So if you're looking at, the original series, they would go back to, apart from maybe Westerns, they would go back to the time that they're actually living in. Star Trek Voyager was in the late 90s. They went back to the same year that they actually were recording in. They went back to 1996.
Ah, okay.
So it was always like, we are in the so then you can just use whatever you want to use then. But this is, as you rightly point out, Mark, this is like 10. I didn't even think about how the age difference being only 10 years. This is only 10 years before he's on board Red Dwarf. Because it is over 3 million years ago, but it's not. But in stasis time, it's only 10, isn't it?
The scene where they're sort of arguing and they're getting closer and closer together. I mean, obviously they're brothers, but it is kind of spooky. The sort of the future, because it goes back to that whole thing of Lister being an art student. So on both sides, you've got them 10 years separate, but they've both got the jackets which they've emblazoned themselves and customized and everything else. So it's two sides of the same coin, and that you can see what they're going to become, and that was quite cool.
You mentioned Crichton there and the android thing. Is this the first Crichton head joke we get?
Doesn't he have one in backwards? Sort of.
Maybe.
Yeah.
No, is that a novelty-shaped condom one?
Isn't it the one where it said, "Oh, just tell people that you forgot to get out when the elevator doors closed," or something like that? Yeah. So it isn't. But it's just one of those ones I was questioning. I was like, is there one before this? But yes, there is, the elevator one. Yeah, because that's in, was that 19? That was 1987 though, wasn't it?
That's right. Whereas this isn't supposed to be 1987, but it looks like it.
That proves my point in the Star Trek thing, isn't it? They did it for the year that they were in, but obviously this one isn't. Right. Okay. So we are getting to kind of wrap up time, but the timelines, which is just from a sci-fi point of view, I quite like, and it works out good for the story writing as well, that we stay with Rimmer.
Yeah.
When things change, in the Back to the Future kind of thing of everything's changing, we stay with that alternate universe when it kicks in. So that is effectively a new Rimmer, which is one of my many Rimmers.
You and your many bloody Rimmers.
It's the same Rimmer, but it's a different Rimmer.
I hope you're keeping track of all these Rimmers.
I was thinking this the other day, actually. I was like, I haven't been keeping track. I should have. So I'm going to have to think about this. But I do like that. And obviously it's for the gag at the end, which we mentioned a couple of episodes ago about the fact that they're using cardboard boxes a lot in this season. So Polymorph obviously used it, and then we get reused here. And
I would question why a mining ship would have cardboard boxes. surely it would be crates full of, I don't know, coal or space coal or whatever it is that they're mining. What are in these cardboard boxes?
Explosives.
Like novelty. Well, clearly.
The grand old tradition of putting space in front of something to make it sound more futuristic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Space coal.
Yeah.
It made me wonder when he gets left alone and Holly says that it's those two for the rest of eternity, and Rimmer's very anti that idea. It made me think back to what I said during series 1, which was how long was it the two of them together before Lister showed up? Because if Rimmer just goes, oh, it's me and you again for the rest of it, not a chance. I'm not going back to that. But obviously he'll have got used to having the other three around, but part of him just doesn't want to spend any more time with Holly.
Well, that's the theme of the episode as well, isn't it? Because Lister's having the same issue.
Yeah.
Because when Rimmer's like getting to the point of, oh no, not again. You know, it's like he's been down that route with Lister. Well, without Lister. If we, as you say, if he's been activated that long, or I know we asked the question, was he just activated at the time Lister came out of stasis?
I think he was.
Shall we talk about Ruby Wax?
Yes. Random cameo.
A random cameo from Ruby Wax, but it was meant to be Graham Chapman of Monty Python fame originally, but he died just shortly before the rehearsals began.
Oh, no.
Obviously, yeah, so that was the reason. And Ruby Wax was obviously brought in because she is Ed By's wife.
Yes.
So,
was
that? Yeah. I was waiting for
that. Was it? Sorry, yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. Did you like that scene? Did you enjoy the 50-foot statue of Lister and the pissing champagne, which isn't quite working yet, and some of the things that Ruby actually said?
Yes, I thought it was very interesting in terms of there's a lot of references in there that probably wouldn't hold up if you weren't around at the time. If like Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch. I think that's lasted a bit better because it's just a funny statement or a funny name to say. She plays the role of a tabloid reporter so well. And literally all she's done is she's put a pair of glasses on.
You're right.
Was it that kind of money opens anybody's legs? I didn't get that joke as a kid. I was like, well, yeah, I suppose it does. Yeah. And then later on, I was like, oh, yeah.
That makes so much more sense now.
Yeah, just things like, oh, he had Buck Palace ruined, dismantled just to line his drive, you know, that kind of thing. No, it's just, she gets a lot in that short bit.
Yeah, which seems quite, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to get into a royalist debate, but that seems to be quite anti-royalist.
Yeah.
A little bit, doesn't it? You know, it's literally pissing on the grounds in which...
But then, the reference to the Queen, it's heavily suggested that it's Elizabeth II. Do you not think?
I didn't get that, no.
Okay, I felt like the way that it was talking was that it was going to be the current Queen because the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. Maybe I'm being weird.
I remember thinking when I first watched it that well, now he's saying about it actually that it's the ground that was Buck Palace, and then the statue's going to pee on that ground, presumably while they're there because they're coming for the royal visit when it's going to be working as well. And that does seem like very Lister to have the patriarchy pissed on, basically.
Yeah. I'm only like sort of not so sure, Mark, purely because I'm trying to really remember what she said, basically. But yeah, I think it's interesting. It goes to the point. I think it goes to the point actually of previous gags where they're very contemporary for the time. You know, you can even include the cassette tapes in this as well. You know, like the Peter Beardsley joke, for example. You know, stuff like that. It's a nod that we are in 1989, by the way, but we're talking about a space show that's like 3 million years in the future. But we're still going to pull in gags that are based on the year that which it's released in.
I mean, and what a late 80s soundtrack to that bit as well. It's It's correct because it's actually Craig Charles, isn't it? And the whole track is on. It's on YouTube. There's the whole song, and it's pretty good. It's really quite good.
I'll have to post that up on Twitter when we release
it. The guy who plays his butler.
The guy who played his butler is Robert Addy, who was Guy of Gisborne in Robin of Sherwood.
Yeah.
And the lady who played Sabrina Mulholland-Jones is Koo Stark, who played Miss Scarlet in the TV show Cluedo.
Yep.
And these two shows that in the last couple of months, well, at time of recording last couple of months, I've looked at on other podcasts, and this was just like a wonderful coincidence for me. I was on Play Your Pods Right to discuss Cluedo, and on my podcast, Writing the Childhood, we discussed Robin of Sherwood for December, and Robert Addy was brilliant in this. The dry wit and the kind of sass of the butler was wonderful.
Yeah, the perfect little thin moustache to go with it as well.
Yeah.
And the slick back hair that just said 90s.
Surely Curtin says 90s.
Curtains definitely say 90s.
I like the fact that Lister as well, even though now he's like super duper mega rich, he's still got that kind of art school aesthetic of his jackets. Still got some modifications on it. I loved his glasses and his hat.
And of course, he is still eating sausage and onion gravy sandwiches on white bread and a glass of sterilised milk.
From Luigi's, this is another thing that I say as well. When there's something that's got an N in the middle where it should be an and, Fish n Chip Emporium. I love that.
Right, okay. So we've talked about Rimmer. In that scene, we've talked about that. But what I really like is the bit where he says, yeah, she's me bird. She's me bird. But again, this is another kind of like classic Red Dwarf comedy sketch where, you know, he basically rhymes off everything you could possibly want in the world. And he finishes the speech off as if it's like a Star Trek thing. You know, it's like, you can imagine you can have everything in the world, but all you need is happiness. That's all you need. You know, as long as if you've got the right people in the right place with you, you know, it doesn't matter about how much money you've got, whatever it may be, you know, you've got riches in your life. They went, it's over. It's cute. It's you, isn't it? Yeah. Which I just love that because it's like you expect something like that's really heartfelt, and then it's just Rimmer's realization. Actually, went, oh, actually,
yeah. It's sort of instead of like Rimmer going against his values by saying that like riches and fame and brilliant and power and everything are all brilliant, he's almost gone against his beliefs by saying like all you need is love and companionship, and at the end of it, he's gone, oh no. Just he realizes he's not talking from the heart on that one.
And I think there was a line I would love to remember who the quote's by, but it's something, and I will be paraphrasing it, something along the lines of, people say that you don't need money to be happy. I would like the opportunity to try.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that does just about does it. I mean, everything comes back to normal. Rimmer's now with everyone. He's not very happy, and then realizes he's alive, which is classic Red Dwarf for me. It's quotable Red Dwarf. I have used that before. You know, I'm alive. You know, just and I love how it's done because you have to be really sharp-witted and quick to see it. Yes. But then obviously in rewatches, you say, oh, right, okay, he hasn't got the H kind of thing. I really like that.
And he's leaning against something.
Yeah.
He's sat down leaning on a bench, which you don't realise until it pulls out just that little bit further.
I love how it's subtle, but when you watch it back, you're like, fucking hell, that wasn't actually that subtle. It's really nicely done.
We've kind of missed out on one of my favourite lines of the whole episode, which is, it's my duty. My duty is a complete and utter bastard. I love that line.
Again, it's like the end of Polymorph, for example, this fact that you've got like the end cliffhanger with Polymorph. With this one, and it's something they do in future seasons, is that, you know, they're completely oblivious. There's just been this massive explosion and they've got things coming off them. And Kat just turns around and says, what was he saying? Yeah. Which I just think
I just like the fact that they don't mention it again. They never mention that Rimmer came back to life for a minute.
And then he obviously has to be, at some point, has to be made back into a hologram, which means it's a different hologram. Or is it the same hologram?
I don't know.
It's just so deliciously harsh, I think is... yes, there's probably continuity errors that the new hologram wouldn't have been able to remember what all of these different Rimmers had gone through. Don't care. It was harsh on Rimmer, therefore funny.
It's brutal. I think that's the thing. I think as a kid watching it, which I would have been about 10, just about 10 years old, roughly, or something like that. Maybe a bit. Maybe I watched it on video when it came out, so it might have been a bit longer after. It comes out of nowhere, like because he literally like looking now, like those boxes are sticking out a little bit either side of his arms. But as a kid, it was just like no, and he just does that and blows himself up. And it doesn't even have any warning on the boxes or anything.
It does have explosives written on it.
Does it? Oh no, I didn't notice that bit.
It does have explosives, but it's like I think the lengthways up, and they're not clear. It's not clear. It says it, but yeah, it's a fantastic end to the episode. But I think we've been talking long enough about it, so we'll be back next week. Carl, you're coming back next week for the last day, which is going to be great. Which in their heads they had as potentially going to be the last day of Red Dwarf. They weren't sure if they were going to get season 4 at that point.
Good grief.
Yeah, and they were, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, next episode. But in the meanwhile, then, anything else you want to bring up before we close up for today?
No, I think it's a very good episode. I mean, this is a very strong series in all. I think anyway. It was one of the first one. I think it was my second series I watched. I think I watched 4 first, and then going back. And this is such a pivotal series for the show as well. And I think every series, like the writing goes up a bit in 2, but in 3 it really takes a jump. And with the whole aesthetic of it going up, it takes a jump as well. I think obviously we'll talk about it a bit in the next episode. But I think if this series wasn't as good as it was, then we probably wouldn't have got a 4. And I think it's ideas like this and Timeslides that people go, this is something good, because it's a lot of original ideas.
And I think they've said that it's their second major sci-fi concept as well, so they're feeling that confident that rather than writing just the porridge of Red Dwarf, the bunk scenes, that they were willing to go down the route of let's play the backwards, let's do the Timeslides. Whereas previous seasons gone by, they might have only done one of them, or it might be more overt to do, the sci-fi elements are in there, but it's not specifically about a sci-fi element, where they've done 2 here. So
it does just seem like they're a lot more confident in series 3 than they were in the first 2. They know they've got something good. They know they've got something culty that people have engaged with, and they've taken the ball and run with it. But I have got one little thing that I'd like to point out.
Yep.
It's a bit like Back to the Future, isn't it? There's a lot of kind of Back to the Future stuff that they've nicked, like Biff and Marty competing over who gets the thing that makes them rich and stuff like that. And I don't mind that, but yeah, it did really make me think, because I've watched Back to the Future recently, I did think, oof, that's quite close actually. And Back to the Future was first.
Right, okay, so that brings us to the end of the episode. So, Carl, where can people find you on that there Tinternet?
People can find me at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl, and it's the unabbreviated MISTER. And on there, we're talking about Cerebral Jukebox, the film night I do, the quiz night I do, Cerebral Jukebox. At the time this is out, should be halfway through side 2 or series 2. I'm really happy with how these episodes are coming along at the moment.
Good stuff. And Mark, where can people find you?
I should get in all my links because I've got far too many podcasts. I haven't, so I'm going to take a lot longer than Carl did. Very, very quickly. 3 other podcasts that I'm currently doing. At Tack Club on Twitter is Super Tack Film Club, which is my B-movie podcast. At RITC Pod is Right in the Childhood, which is the podcast I talked very briefly about earlier in the episode, where I look at kids' TV from 2 respective childhoods of people either side of millennials. And the other one is, of course, Life's Milestones, at Life's Milestones on Twitter, which is my podcast related to my job as a humanist celebrant.
Excellent stuff. And don't forget to check out the other podcasts that are on the We Made This Podcast Network. You can check us out on at We Made This Pod, which is great to do that. There will also be some clips at the end of this episode. But to find me, you can find me on Twitter at rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE. You can find me on the Star Trek Picard podcast, Make It So, at Jean-Luc Podard on Twitter. That's Jean-Luc Podard. You can find me on the Xcast. That's the X-Files podcast on the X_cast. And you can find me on the Millennium podcast, which is a TV show that was a spin-off from the X-Files. And you can find me there at the Time Is Now pod. So those are the best places to find me. So until next week, where we discuss The Last Day, remember everyone.
Oh, I played Junior Angler with her.
I'm alive!
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you've just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming. Elsewhere on We Made This. The Time Is Now, a Millennium podcast.
But no, I mean, I will say that Rise of the Machines also kind of like argues against
Terminator 2, of course.
Back to where it was.
Like Rise of the Machines, like then goes, maybe they're both right, and shrugs its shoulders. It's like, maybe you can prevent Judgment Day, but only for a little while. And it's like, that's not an argument. Pick a side. Pick a lane. You can either change the past or you can't. None of this wishy-washy. You can change it sometimes, but you can't really change it. So it all balances out. Yeah, no, pick a damn side.
Don't say the C word.
On the back of my right arm, I have a tattoo of Phil Collins. It's the front cover of No Jacket Required.
This was the one that I expected you to pick, I'll be honest with you. Because it is my favourite of your tattoos.
Yeah. I mean, it was a tattoo I got as a joke. A lot of my tattoos that I've got, a lot of everything that I do is because it's a joke or if I think something's funny.
We buy records.
Eric Clapton and Van Morrison have released an anti-lockdown song. How do you think about this? Where does this sit on the shitometer?
I think it redefines the shitometer.
Right.
I think it's raising money for musicians who are affected by the lockdown and the lack of gigs, etc., which is a good thing.
Yep.
But then you see Van Morrison and Eric Clapton, a bad thing. So,
right.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, I love Van Morrison's music. I don't particularly like Eric Clapton's music. I quite like the 60s stuff. But they're a couple of whinging old men, aren't they? Old man babies complaining that they can't go and lick whoever they want.
Ooh.
I know, but that's what they're singing about. I think I haven't checked that. I assume that the lyrics are about.
You can take it as read that I haven't heard it.
It's not likely to have a banging donk on it, is it?
It's unlikely to have a banging donk.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.